"She will never look good on a gown," mocked the CEO. But everything changed the moment she walked into the room. Everyone laughed when a powerful CEO humiliated a quiet seamstress in front of his entire staff. He thought she was nobody, just another woman he could crush with a single cruel sentence. But the next night, at the company's biggest event of the year, the crowd freezes. Because the woman he mocked steps through the doors wearing a gown she made herself. And suddenly the CEO goes silent. She's not there to deliver dresses. She's there to deliver a truth that could destroy his whole empire. A truth he never saw coming. And one he's terrified the world will hear. What secret is she hiding? And why does her arrival threaten everything the CEO built? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. And if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Dawn crept softly over the Colorado mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in gentle shades of pink and gold. Inside her small alterations shop on Main Street, Sierra Dane stood before 3 magnificent gowns, her skilled hands moving with practiced precision as steam rose in delicate wisps around her. The early morning light filtered through the shop's front windows, catching the intricate beadwork she had painstakingly sewn into each dress. "Almost perfect," she whispered, adjusting the steam setting on her professional iron. The fabric responded to her touch like a living thing, smoothing out under the gentle pressure. These gowns were special, commissioned for the Hale Resort's 50th anniversary gala, and Sierra had poured her heart into every stitch. The first dress, a deep emerald silk, caught the light and seemed to shimmer like mountain leaves after rain. The second, in midnight blue, bore delicate silver threading that mimicked the stars Sierra could see from her shop's back door on clear nights. The third, in classic black, featured hand-sewn crystal beading that had taken her 3 full evenings to complete. Sierra hummed softly as she worked, an old hymn her mother used to sing. The familiar melody filled the quiet shop as she added final touches to each gown. A strengthening stitch here, a careful press there. Her fingers, strong and sure from years of practice, moved with quiet confidence over the expensive fabrics. When the clock struck 7, Sierra paused to make herself a simple breakfast. In her tiny kitchen above the shop, she sat at the scratched wooden table that had been her mother's, sipping coffee and eating toast with honey. Through her window, she could see the mountains that cradled their small town, their peaks sharp against the morning sky. The sight never failed to fill her with peace, even on challenging days. "Lord, let these dresses bring joy to whoever wears them," she prayed softly, washing her cup in the sink. It was time to deliver her creations. Sierra carefully wrapped, each gown in protective garment bags, handling them with the reverence they deserved. The stairs creaked familiarly as she carried them down to her old blue hatchback. The car had seen better days, but it was reliable. Like everything else in Sierra's life, it was well cared for and loved despite its imperfections. The drive to Hale Resort wound through evergreen forests and past tumbling mountain streams. Sierra's heart beat a little faster as the impressive stone and glass building came into view. The resort stood proud against its mountain backdrop, a testament to luxury and privilege that sometimes made Sierra feel small in her sensible shoes and simple clothes. The preparation hall was already bustling when she arrived. Staff members hurried about with clipboards and phones, their voices echoing off the high ceilings. Sierra carefully unloaded her precious cargo, balancing the garment bags across her arms as she made her way inside. "The gowns for the gala," she explained softly to 2 assistants who approached. They nodded briskly, reaching for the bags. "Just a moment." A sharp voice cut through the general noise of the hall. Sierra turned to see, Roman Hale striding toward them, his expensive suit as crisp as the morning air outside. His presence seemed to make the room grow colder, and staff members subtly stepped back, creating space around him. Roman Hale was a striking man, with steel-grey eyes and dark hair touched with silver at the temples. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never known what it meant to doubt his place in the world. Those eyes now fixed on Sierra's work as he gestured for the assistants to unzip the garment bags. Sierra stood quietly as he inspected each gown, his expression impossible to read. She knew her work was excellent, every seam was perfect, every bead secure, every line elegant. But under his scrutiny, she found herself holding her breath. Finally, Roman's lips curved into a smirk that made Sierra's stomach tighten. "Well," he drawled, his voice carrying clearly in the now silent hall, "I suppose these will do for the less discerning guests." He paused, his eyes sweeping over Sierra's simple dress and practical flats. "Though you'll never look good in a gown like this yourself." Laughter rippled through the hall, nervous, forced laughter from staff who knew which side their bread was buttered on. Sierra felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her spine straight and her voice steady. "Thank you for your feedback, Mr. Hale," she said quietly. "I hope the gowns serve their purpose well." She turned to the assistants. "Please handle them carefully. The beading on the black one is quite delicate." She walked out of the hall with measured steps, her head high despite the way her heart was pounding. She didn't allow herself to hurry until she reached her car, where she sat for a moment with her hands tight on the steering wheel, drawing deep breaths. The drive back to town seemed longer than usual. The morning's beauty had dimmed somehow, though the sun still sparkled on the snow and the mountains still stood majestic against the sky. Sierra tried to focus on the road, on the familiar curves and the patches of early spring wildflowers beginning to show in sunny spots. By the time dusk settled over the town, Sierra was back in her shop, methodically folding bolts of fabric. The familiar textures, silk, cotton, wool, soothed her hands, if not her heart. She arranged them by color, creating a rainbow of possibilities for future projects. "It doesn't matter," she whispered to herself, smoothing a length of pale blue cotton. His words don't matter. But even as she said it, she felt the sting of Roman Hale's casual cruelty, the way he had dismissed not just her work, but her very self. The shop grew darker as the sun set behind the mountains. Sierra continued folding fabric, each precise movement a small act of defiance against the doubt that threatened to creep in. She had built this life for herself, this quiet, honest life of creating beautiful things with her hands. No one, not even Roman Hale, could take that away from her. Still, as she climbed the stairs to her apartment that evening, her mother's old table waiting with its familiar scratches and warm memories, Sierra couldn't quite shake the ache in her heart. She touched one of the scratches gently, remembering her mother's words about dignity being something no one could take unless you gave it away. She hadn't given hers away today, but keeping it had cost her something all the same. The morning sun hadn't yet peeked over the mountains when Sierra's alarm chimed softly. She lay in bed for a moment, yesterday's humiliation still fresh in her mind. Roman Hale's smirking face and cruel words floated through her thoughts like unwelcome guests. "Not today," she whispered firmly to her empty bedroom. "Today is for work." She went through her morning routine with deliberate care, washing her face, smoothing her curls into a neat bun, choosing a comfortable dress in deep purple that always made her feel capable. Her movements were measured, each one a small act of self-preservation. The shop below her apartment was quiet and familiar, welcoming her with the subtle scent of fabric and leather from her sewing machine. Sierra moved through the space, straightening bolts of fabric and organizing her tools. She picked up pieces of delicate lace, running them through her fingers before arranging them in their proper places. Her sketches, dreams made real in pencil and paper, covered the corkboard above her workstation. Tea, she murmured to herself. Everything looks better after tea. She was just filling her kettle when an unfamiliar sound caught her attention. The purr of a luxury engine, unusual for this quiet street at such an early hour. Through her front window, she watched a sleek black sedan pull up to the curb. The car looked completely out of place among the weathered storefronts and practical pickup trucks of her mountain town. Sierra stepped outside, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the morning chill. A tall man in his late 50s emerged from the sedan, his silver hair neat and his suit well-tailored but not flashy. His face was kind, with laugh lines around his eyes that somehow made him look more dignified rather than less. "Miss Sierra Dane?" he asked, his voice warm and professional. "I'm Callum Reeves, attorney at law." He extended his hand, and Sierra shook it, noting his firm but gentle grip. "How can I help you, Mr. Reeves?" Instead of answering immediately, Callum reached into his briefcase and withdrew a cream-colored envelope. Sierra's breath caught as she saw the seal, an intricate crest featuring a mountain peak and what looked like threading needles. "This belongs to you," Callum said softly. "It's from your grandfather." Sierra's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. "There must be some mistake. I never knew my grandfather. My mother, she never spoke of him." "No mistake, Miss Dane. Please read the contents carefully. I'll return at 2 o'clock this afternoon for a private meeting, if that's convenient." Sierra nodded numbly, still staring at the seal. She barely registered Callum getting back into his car and driving away. Inside her shop, Sierra placed the envelope on her cutting table, staring at it as if it might suddenly disappear. Her tea kettle whistled, making her jump. She moved through the motions of making tea, her mind whirling with questions. The legal summons inside the envelope was printed on heavy paper, the words formal and somehow momentous. A meeting was required, today, at her cabin. Her grandfather's name was at the bottom, Jonathan Hale. Hale. Sierra sat down hard in her sewing chair. "It can't be," she whispered to the empty shop. The hours until 2 o'clock stretched endlessly. Sierra paced her shop floor, straightened items that were already neat, and wiped down surfaces that were already clean. She vacuumed her small sitting area twice. Her hands needed occupation, but she couldn't focus enough to sew. Questions tumbled through her mind. Why had her mother never told her? What did this mean? Why now? At precisely 2 o'clock, Callum's sedan appeared again. Sierra had already prepared fresh tea, her grandmother's china cups set out on the small table by the window. Her hands shook slightly as she poured. "Thank you," Callum said, accepting a cup. He placed his briefcase on the table and withdrew several folders. "Miss Dane, what I'm about to tell you will come as quite a shock. I ask that you try to stay calm and know that I'm here to answer any questions you have." Sierra nodded, gripping her teacup like an anchor. "Your grandfather, Jonathan Hale, was the founder of Hale Industries. He built the company from nothing, starting with a single factory and growing it into what it is today." Callum paused, watching Sierra's face carefully. "Tomorrow marks the company's 50th anniversary, and according to your grandfather's final wishes, at that time, you will become the majority shareholder of Hale Industries." The teacup rattled against its saucer as Sierra set it down. "I'm sorry, what?" "You, Sierra Dane, are about to inherit controlling interest in one of the largest companies in the state." Sierra stood up abruptly, moving to her shop window. Snow was beginning to fall outside, fat flakes drifting past the glass. "But why me? Why not?" She couldn't bring herself to say Roman's name. "Your grandfather had his reasons," Callum said gently, "which I'll explain if you're ready to hear them." The hours slipped by as Callum answered Sierra's questions. He explained about her mother's estrangement from the family, about Jonathan's regrets and his hope for redemption through Sierra. The sun set while they talked, the snow continuing to fall outside, transforming the street into a quiet wonderland. After Callum finally left, Sierra sat at her mother's old table, surrounded by legal documents that detailed her new reality. Her fingers traced the grain of the wood, remembering all the times she and her mother had sat here together. Had her mother known this day would come? Had she been protecting Sierra by keeping silent about their connection to the Hales? The snow fell steadily now, muffling the world outside. Sierra stared at the papers spread before her, each one representing a piece of a life she never knew was waiting for her. Her simple, quiet world had just shifted on its axis, and she had no idea what tomorrow would bring. Sierra woke to golden morning light filtering through her faded floral curtains. She had barely slept, her mind racing with the weight of yesterday's revelations. The familiar sight of her small bedroom brought little comfort today. Even these walls seemed different somehow, as if they too knew her life had fundamentally changed. She sat up slowly, running her fingers through her curls. The digital clock on her nightstand read 7:15 in the morning. Usually she'd be starting work in her shop by now, but today felt different. The thought of being alone with her thoughts in her workspace seemed overwhelming. "I need people," she whispered to herself. "Normal, everyday people." The main street diner had been her comfort spot since childhood. Her mother used to take her there for special occasions, sharing plates of warm pancakes drowned in syrup. Sierra pulled on her warmest sweater and comfortable boots, deciding a walk through the crisp morning air might help clear her head. Bell chimes announced her arrival at the diner, the familiar scent of coffee and bacon wrapped around her like a hug. Martha, the 60-something waitress who'd known Sierra since she was knee-high, waved from behind the counter. "Your usual spot's open, honey," Martha called out, already reaching for a coffee pot. Sierra slid into her favorite booth by the window. The worn leather seat cushion squeaked softly beneath her. From here, she could see the snow-capped mountains that surrounded their small town, eternal guardians of their community. "You look tired, sweetie," Martha said, filling Sierra's cup with steaming coffee. "Everything okay?" Sierra managed a small smile. "Just thinking about some changes coming up." "Well, don't you worry too much. Change comes whether we're ready or not." Martha patted her shoulder. "French toast today?" Before Sierra could answer, voices from the booth behind her caught her attention. She recognized Mr. Peterson's gravelly tone. He'd worked at Hale Industries for 35 years before retiring. "It's not right what they're doing to folks," he was saying. "My neighbor Sarah, single mother of 3, just got laid off from the factory last week. No warning, nothing. And her medical benefits? Gone." "It's that Roman Hale," another voice chimed in. "Mrs. Cooper, who'd worked in accounting. Ever since he took over, it's been nothing but cuts. Remember when old Jonathan ran things? We had pension plans, medical care, even scholarships for our kids. The community workshops, too," Mr. Peterson added sadly. "My grandson was learning woodworking there before they shut them down. Said it wasn't cost-effective. Everything's about money now." Sierra's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Each word felt like a physical blow. These weren't just statistics. These were her neighbors, people she'd known all her life. And Roman, he'd been systematically destroying everything her grandfather had built. After forcing down half a plate of French toast, Sierra walked home with heavy steps. The morning sun did nothing to warm the chill that had settled in her chest. In her living room, she stared at the stack of boxes she'd inherited from her mother, but had never fully explored. With trembling fingers, she opened the first box. Old photos, receipts, and papers filled it to the brim. Near the bottom, she found a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The return address made her breath catch. Hale Industries Corporate Office. The first letter was dated just after Sierra was born. Her mother's handwriting was desperate, pleading for help with mounting medical bills from complications during Sierra's birth. The response, signed by Roman Hale himself, was cold and formal. After review of your request, we must decline assistance at this time. Current cost reduction initiatives prevent us from considering cases outside our streamlined benefits structure. We suggest seeking aid through public assistance programs. Tears splashed onto the yellowed paper. Her mother had never mentioned this, had carried this rejection silently while working 3 jobs to make ends meet. And Roman, he'd been there all along, wielding his power with such casual cruelty. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows when Callum's car pulled up outside. Sierra quickly wiped her eyes and tucked the letters away. He entered, carrying a thick folder and a gentle expression. "How are you holding up?" he asked, settling at her kitchen table. "I've been learning things," Sierra replied quietly. "About the company, about Roman." Callum's face softened with understanding. "Your grandfather feared this would happen when he stepped down. That's partly why he arranged things this way. He wanted someone with heart to take the reins again." He opened his folder, spreading out papers. "Now, about tomorrow night's gala. The official announcement of your inheritance isn't scheduled until next week. It might be easier if you attend quietly tomorrow. Let me handle the transition." "No." Sierra's voice was soft, but firm. "I need to be there as myself, as Jonathan Hale's granddaughter." "Sierra, are you sure? The board members will be hostile. Roman won't take this well." "I'm sure." Sierra stood and walked to her drafting table, pulling out fresh paper. "My grandfather built something beautiful, something that helped people. Roman broke that. And now—" She picked up a pencil, beginning to sketch flowing lines. "Now it's my turn to fix it." The lamp cast a warm glow as her pencil moved across the paper. A gown began to take shape, elegant but strong, like the mountain peaks outside her window. As she drew, she thought of her mother's struggle, of Sarah and her 3 children, of Mr. Peterson's grandson with no place to learn his craft. The design flowed from her heart, a dress worthy of a woman stepping into her power, ready to reclaim her grandfather's legacy of compassion. The first rays of sunlight crept through Sierra's workshop windows, casting a golden glow across her drafting table. She'd barely slept, her mind too full of yesterday's discoveries, but her hands were steady as she laid out the fabric for her gala gown. The rich, midnight blue silk charmeuse shimmered like starlight, a color that reminded her of nights spent watching the sky with her mother. "This is for you too, Mama," she whispered, making the first cut with reverence. Sierra worked with practiced precision, each movement carrying the weight of generations. The bodice pattern took shape under her careful hands, fitted but not constraining, structured yet fluid. As she pinned the pieces together, she infused every motion with the stories she'd learned, her grandfather's legacy of kindness, her mother's quiet strength, the community's enduring spirit. The morning hours slipped by in a rhythm of stitches and steam pressing. By 10 o'clock, she needed a break to rest her eyes and gather more information. Sierra carefully draped the unfinished bodice over her dress form and grabbed her worn leather bag. The community center stood 3 blocks away, its brick facade weathered but proud. Inside, the once bustling sewing rooms were eerily quiet. Miss Martha, one of the original instructors from her grandfather's time, sat alone at an old Singer machine, teaching 2 young girls basic stitches. "Sierra, honey," Miss Martha's face lit up. Come, come, I'm just showing these sweethearts how to hem. Sierra settled into a nearby chair, watching the girls' careful concentration. I remember when this room was full, she said softly. Miss Martha's smile faded slightly. Those were better days, child. Old Jonathan Hale, he understood the value of teaching skills. We had classes morning till night. Single mothers learning trades, veterans finding purpose in creating things with their hands. What happened? Sierra asked, though she already knew. Roman Hale happened. Miss Martha's voice carried no bitterness, only sadness. First, he cut the funding. Then the equipment started breaking with no budget for repairs. Finally, last year he tried to sell the building entirely. Only reason we're still here is because of some old legal clause requiring community access. The young girls looked up, sensing the shift in mood. Miss Martha quickly brightened her tone. But we keep on teaching, don't we, girls? Every stitch is an act of hope. Sierra spent the next 2 hours visiting similar sites. The woodworking shop where only one lathe still worked, the career center operating on volunteer hours, the daycare facility struggling to stay open. Each stop revealed another thread of her grandfather's vision unraveled by Roman's coldness. At the last workshop, she met Mr. James, a master tailor who'd worked directly with her grandfather. His eyes grew misty when she introduced herself. You have his kindness in your face, he said, touching her hand. Jonathan believed craft wasn't just about making things, it was about making lives better. Roman, he only sees numbers on a page. Back home by 4 o'clock, Sierra turned on her small radio, letting gospel music fill the space. The familiar harmonies of His Eye is on the Sparrow wrapped around her like a warm embrace as she returned to her work. The bodice took shape beneath her fingers, strong seams, precise top stitching, delicate boning that would support without confining. Across town, in his sleek corner office, Roman Hale's day was taking an unsettling turn. He stared at the report on his desk, brow furrowed. "And you're certain about this?" he asked his assistant. "Yes, sir. The seamstress, Sierra Dane. She's had 2 meetings with Callum Reeves in the past 24 hours. And there's more." The assistant shifted nervously. "We found her name connected to some old Hale documents, something about a trust activation clause." Roman's jaw tightened. He remembered the quiet dignity in her eyes when he'd mocked her work, the way she'd held herself like someone who knew her own worth. Now pieces were shifting, suggesting she might be more than she appeared. "Keep digging," he ordered. "I want to know everything about her by tomorrow morning." The sun was setting when Sierra finally allowed herself to try on the partially completed gown. Standing before her, full-length mirror, she smoothed the silk over her curves. The bodice fit perfectly, supporting and highlighting without restriction. The skirt panels lay ready to be attached, their subtle pleating designed to move like water. "Lord," she prayed softly, meeting her reflection's eyes, "give me strength to carry this burden with grace. Help me remember this isn't about proving anything to Roman. It's about protecting people who need help." The evening deepened into night. Sierra's lamp cast a warm circle of light as she worked on the delicate lace overlay. Each tiny stitch was a promise, to her grandfather's memory, to her mother's sacrifices, to the community that had raised her. Tomorrow she would walk into that gala not as the seamstress Roman had dismissed, but as Jonathan Hale's heir, carrying generations of hope in every fold of silk and lace. Her fingers moved steadily, the needle catching moonlight as it dipped and rose. Outside her window, the mountains stood silent against the star-filled sky, eternal witnesses to the quiet revolution being sown one stitch at a time. The morning sun painted Sierra's bedroom in shades of gold, as she carefully lifted the finished gown from her work form. Her fingers traced the intricate beadwork that had kept her up until 3 in the morning, tiny crystals and pearls forming delicate patterns like frost on winter windows. The deep blue silk charmeuse caught the light, shifting between midnight and ocean depths. She'd chosen the color deliberately. In her community, deep blue represented both morning and hope. The darkness before dawn, the depths that held hidden treasures. Each element of the dress carried meaning. The structured bodice representing strength, the flowing skirt suggesting adaptability, the hand-sewn lace overlay honoring traditional craftsmanship. "This is it," Sierra whispered, carefully folding the gown into layers of tissue paper. Her hands moved with practiced precision, protecting each seam and detail as she nestled it into her garment bag. She packed her styling tools and makeup in a separate case, double-checking everything against her list. The drive into the city gave her time to prepare mentally. Mountain views gradually gave way to urban landscapes as she navigated towards the downtown hotel Callum had arranged. Her old hatchback looked out of place pulling up to the gleaming entrance, but the valet treated her with professional courtesy. "Ms. Dane?" The front desk manager smiled warmly. "Mr. Reeves left instructions for your check-in. You'll be in suite 412. The suite was larger than Sierra's entire cabin. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping city views, while the bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome. She carefully hung her garment bag in the closet, smoothing away any travel wrinkles. Across town, Roman Hale stood at the head of the conference table, his frustration evident in the tight set of his jaw. The morning's board meeting had gone from concerning to infuriating. "What do you mean we can't proceed with the acquisition?" he demanded, glaring at the legal team. The head lawyer shuffled papers nervously. "There appears to be a previously unknown clause in the company charter, sir. Any major structural changes are frozen for review during milestone anniversaries. We can't move forward until after tonight's gala." Roman's hand clenched around his pen. "This is the 3rd unexpected restriction this week. First the community center sale, then the pension adjustments, now this. Something isn't adding up." Board members exchanged uneasy glances. Roman caught the silent communication, and his eyes narrowed. "Does anyone want to share what they know?" Silence stretched thick across the polished table. Finally, Roman pushed back his chair with controlled force. "I need to prepare for tonight. But this conversation isn't over." He left the boardroom, his measured steps masking his inner turmoil. Years of careful planning were suddenly hitting invisible walls, and he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Sierra took her time getting ready, knowing that every detail mattered. She showered using the hotel's luxury products, letting the warm water ease her tension. After drying her natural curls carefully, she began the process of styling them into an elegant updo that would showcase both her heritage and sophistication. Her makeup routine was methodical. Foundation blended to perfection, subtle contouring to enhance her features, and a touch of shimmer to catch the light. She kept the colors soft and natural, wanting to look like herself, only elevated. "Lord, give me strength," she prayed quietly as she opened her garment bag. The gown whispered as she lifted it, the silk cool against her skin as she stepped in. The bodice hugged her curves perfectly, providing support while allowing her to breathe freely. Each crystal caught the late afternoon light, creating tiny rainbows on the hotel walls. A knock at her door announced Callum's arrival. He stood in the hallway looking distinguished in his tuxedo, his kind eyes crinkling with approval when he saw her. "You look exactly like your grandmother on her wedding day," he said softly. "She wore blue too." Sierra's heart squeezed at this unexpected connection to her family history. "Tell me honestly, Callum, is everything ready?" He patted the briefcase at his side. "All the legal documents are in order. Your grandfather's wishes were very clear, and the timing is legally binding. Are you ready?" Sierra took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be." The hotel lobby fell quiet as they walked through, heads turning to follow their passage. The waiting limousine gleamed black against the purple dusk, its driver holding the door with practiced elegance. Traffic moved slowly through the city center, giving Sierra glimpses of the venue ahead. The historic Meridian building had been transformed for the gala, its limestone facade washed with golden light. A red carpet stretched from the curb to the entrance, lined with photographers capturing arriving guests. The limousine joined the queue of vehicles waiting to drop off attendees. Sierra could see camera flashes through the tinted windows, hear the muffled sounds of the crowd. Her heart pounded against the structured bodice of her gown. Finally, their car pulled up to the carpet. The driver opened her door, and Sierra emerged into a storm of flashbulbs. She paused for a moment on the sidewalk, taking in the glittering scene before her. Music drifted from inside, mixing with the buzz of conversation and laughter. The massive wooden doors stood open like the maw of a great beast, warm light spilling out to puddle on the red carpet. Sierra felt the weight of the moment settle around her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She was about to walk into the heart of everything her grandfather had built, and everything Roman had tried to destroy. Through the grand entrance, Sierra stepped into a scene of breathtaking opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from the 30-foot ceilings, their light fracturing into countless diamonds across the polished marble floor. The ballroom stretched before her, a vast space filled with hundreds of guests in designer formal wear, their laughter and conversation creating a melodic hum beneath the classical music played by a string quartet. Sierra pressed a hand to her stomach, steadying herself. The deep blue silk of her handmade gown whispered against the floor as she made her way to a quiet corner. From this vantage point, she could observe without drawing attention. Waiters in crisp black uniforms weaved through the crowd, carrying flutes of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. A hush fell over the room as Roman Hale took the stage, commanding attention in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. His presence was magnetic, she had to admit. But now she saw past the polished exterior to the calculating mind beneath. "Welcome to Hale Industries' 50th anniversary celebration." Roman's voice carried effortlessly across the ballroom. "Tonight, we honor 5 decades of innovation and bold leadership. When this company began, it was just a small factory in a mountain town. Today, we're a global force, driving progress through decisive action and strategic vision." Sierra's fingers tightened around her clutch as she listened. Each word felt hollow, knowing what she'd learned about the human cost of his strategic vision. She thought of Mrs. Patterson at the diner, whose pension had been cut after 30 years of service, of the community center where local craftspeople once taught their skills to younger generations, now empty and dark. "The future belongs to those willing to make bold choices," Roman continued, raising his glass. "To another 50 years of growth and success," and the crowd applauded enthusiastically, but Sierra noticed some of the older employees hanging back, their clapping perfunctory. These would be the ones who remembered how things used to be under her grandfather's leadership. She circulated quietly through the party, catching fragments of conversation. Board members congratulated themselves on recent profit margins. Young executives pitched aggressive expansion plans. Nobody mentioned the workers or the community that had built this company from the ground up. After 2 hours, the weight of all she'd learned pressed heavily on her shoulders. Sierra slipped out early, nodding goodbye to Callum, who understood her need for rest before tomorrow's meetings. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Sierra dressed carefully in a simple navy pantsuit, wanting to project professionalism while visiting the factory towns. Callum had arranged meetings with current and former workers, giving her a chance to truly understand the scope of what she was inheriting. Her first stop was the Miller Creek factory, where 3 generations of families had once worked side by side. Now the workforce was half its former size, with many veteran employees replaced by temporary workers without benefits. "We used to have proper health care," explained Martha Wilson, a line supervisor in her 60s. "Dental, too. Mr. Hale, your grandfather, he understood that healthy workers meant quality products. But that all changed when Roman took over." Sierra sat with the workers during their lunch break, sharing sandwiches as they shared their stories. Tom Baker had lost half his pension after 35 years of service. Sarah Martinez's daughter had to drop out of the company scholarship program when Roman eliminated it for cost savings. "Your grandfather started that program," Sarah said softly. "He believed in investing in the next generation. My older kids got their degrees because of him, but my youngest, she's working 2 jobs now instead of being in college." From Miller Creek, Sierra drove to Riverside, where the largest textile workshop had operated until 3 years ago. The building stood empty now, its windows dusty and dark. But the community center next door was full of life, maintained by retired workers who refused to let their skills die. "We teach sewing, weaving, all the old crafts," explained George Thompson, who'd worked as a master tailor for 40 years. "Can't let the young ones forget where they came from, but it's not easy without proper funding." Sierra watched as elderly artisans worked with teenagers, showing them techniques passed down through generations. Her heart ached seeing their dedication despite having so little support. In Palmer Heights, she met with union representatives who shared documentation of systematic program cuts, healthcare reductions, training programs eliminated, community outreach budgets slashed to 0. "Your grandfather built more than a company," said union leader Mike Davidson. "He built a family. We all looked out for each other. Now it's just numbers on spreadsheets." As the sun began to set, Sierra returned to her hotel room, physically and emotionally drained. She changed into comfortable pajamas and settled at the desk with her journal, needing to process everything she'd witnessed. "Today I saw the true face of what Roman has done," she wrote, her pen moving steadily across the page. "But I also saw the heart of what grandfather built. It's still beating in these communities, even if it's growing weaker. These people haven't given up. Neither will I." She outlined her initial plans: reinstating the pension program, reopening the community centers, restoring the scholarship fund. It would take time and careful management, but she knew it was possible. These weren't just charitable programs, they were investments in the company's foundation. In her hotel room's peaceful quiet, Sierra didn't know that across town, Roman sat in his office long after midnight, a familiar feeling of unease driving him to dig deeper. The seamstress's presence at the gala had seemed too deliberate, too composed. He pulled up search after search, looking for any connection between Sierra Dane and Hale Industries' past. Sierra closed her journal and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more stories, more truth. But tonight, she felt centered in her purpose. Her grandfather's legacy wasn't just in legal documents or profit margins. It lived in the people who still believed in his vision of business with a heart. The community center buzzed with youthful energy as Sierra arrived the next morning. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating tables where young girls gathered with fabric scraps and thread. Miss Dorothy, who had taught Sierra to sew when she was just 12 years old, greeted her with a warm hug. "These girls need someone to show them they matter." Dorothy whispered. Just like you did back then. Sierra's heart swelled as she took in the familiar scent of cotton and hope that filled the room. 25 girls, ages 8 to 13, sat chattering excitedly around craft tables. Many wore second-hand clothes, but their eyes sparkled with possibility. Ladies, Dorothy called out, this is Miss Sierra. She started right where you are, and now she makes beautiful dresses for fancy people. The girls' faces lit up as Sierra settled at the first table. She pulled colorful thread samples from her bag, showing them how different stitches could create tiny flowers and hearts. See, every stitch tells a story, she explained, guiding a small hand holding a needle. Just take your time, there's no rush. Sierra moved between tables, kneeling beside each girl, adjusting grips and offering gentle encouragement. She remembered herself at their age, how a simple, well done could light up her whole world. The front door opened, letting in a blast of cool air. Sierra glanced up to see Roman Hale standing awkwardly in the entrance, looking oddly out of place in his tailored suit. Her stomach tightened, but she kept her focus on the girl beside her. That's perfect, Lily, she praised, watching tiny fingers form careful stitches. You're getting the hang of it. From the corner of her eye, she saw Roman watching her. His usual mask of corporate confidence seemed to slip as he observed her patient interactions with the children. Sierra continued her circuit of the room, determined not to let his presence disrupt the girls' learning. After 15 minutes, Roman approached her table. He cleared his throat softly. Miss Dane, he said, his voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I didn't expect to see you here. Sierra looked up, keeping her expression neutral. I volunteer when I can. These girls deserve to know their worth. A small girl tugged at Sierra's sleeve. Miss Sierra, I made a heart. Look! Sierra turned her full attention to the crooked but earnest attempt. That's beautiful, Maria. You're really understanding the pattern now. Roman shifted his weight, something uncertain in his stance. I wanted to apologize for my behavior at the resort. It was unprofessional and unkind. Sierra met his eyes steadily. Here was the man who had hurt so many people, looking almost human as he watched children learn to create. She saw no need to make his apology easier by brushing it off. Thank you for saying that, she said simply, then returned to helping Maria with her next stitch. Roman lingered, watching as Sierra demonstrated a new technique to the group. Her voice remained soft but clear, her instructions peppered with encouragement and gentle humor. The girls responded to her natural warmth, their initial shyness melting away. As the session wound down, Sierra helped the girls pack up their supplies. Each one received a small bag of thread and needles to take home, a gift from Dorothy's program. Their excited chatter filled the room as they gathered their treasures. Miss Sierra, will you be here next week? Several voices called out. I'll try my best, she promised, giving hugs and high fives as they departed. To her surprise, Roman had stayed for the entire session. As she gathered her things, he approached again. May I walk you to your car? Sierra nodded, saying goodbye to Dorothy with another warm hug. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as they walked across the parking lot. I didn't know about this program, Roman said, breaking the silence. There's a lot happening in this community, Sierra replied. Things that don't show up on quarterly reports. He glanced at her sharply, but her face remained serene. The girls seem to really connect with you, he observed. They just need someone to see them, Sierra said, to remind them they're capable of creating beautiful things. They reached her car, and Sierra turned to face him. Gone was the man who had mockingly dismissed her at the resort. This Roman Hale seemed less certain, more human. Thank you for the apology, she said. It means something that you came to say it in person. Roman nodded, looking slightly lost without his usual corporate armor. You're not what I expected. Sierra smiled slightly. People rarely are, if we take the time to really see them. She drove back to her hotel, her mind full of the day's contrasts, children's laughter and Roman's discomfort, hope and hesitation, the past and possible futures. In her room, she found a thick envelope from Callum waiting. For the next 3 hours, Sierra pored over financial documents that revealed the true state of Hale Industries. Programs slashed, corners cut, profits prioritized over people. The numbers told a story of systematic dismantling of everything her grandfather had built. Community investment accounts drained, worker safety budgets minimized, training programs eliminated. Sierra's hand trembled as she made note, the weight of responsibility settling deeper into her bones. The rot went beyond surface changes. It had seeped into the company's very foundation. But today had shown her something important. Change was possible. She had seen it in the girls' proud smiles, in Roman's moment of humanity, in Dorothy's unwavering dedication to lifting others up. She organized the papers carefully, her mind already forming plans for restoration. The company's heart was still beating, faintly, but not beyond saving. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she held on to the image of small hands learning to create something beautiful, one stitch at a time. The morning sun filtered through tall windows as Sierra walked the quiet halls of Hale Industries' main office building. Her heels clicked against polished floors that had seen 50 years of footsteps, including her grandfather's. Every few steps she paused to study faded photographs on the walls, images of happier times when the company still put people first. Mrs. Henderson, a secretary who'd worked there for 32 years, guided Sierra through the accounting department. Your grandfather used to bring cookies to our meetings, she said softly, touching a worn desk. He knew everyone's children's names. Sierra noticed the ancient computers, the tired faces, the way people hunched over their work without looking up. The building felt heavy with resignation. What happened to the education fund? Sierra asked, examining a dusty plaque commemorating the program. Mrs. Henderson's lips tightened. Discontinued 5 years ago, along with the apprenticeship program and the family health initiative. Throughout the morning, Sierra collected similar stories. The maintenance supervisor showed her broken equipment held together with tape. A veteran machinist demonstrated how they'd modified safety guards to keep old machines running. Everyone spoke of before and after, before Roman's aggressive cost-cutting, after the programs ended. Meanwhile, across town, Roman paced his executive suite, phone pressed to his ear. What do you mean you can't discuss it? He demanded. I'm the CEO. The board is bound by legal restrictions, came the careful reply. All will be revealed in due time. Roman slammed the phone down, frustration building. Something was happening beneath his feet, and no one would give him straight answers. He needed to clear his head. Without fully examining his motives, he found himself driving to Sierra's small shop in the afternoon. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Sierra looked up from her work, surprise flickering across her face. She stood at a worn cutting table, pins held between her lips as she adjusted the hem of a pale pink dress. Mr. Hale, she said carefully, removing the pins. I wasn't expecting you. Roman shifted, suddenly uncertain why he'd come. I wanted to order a suit, and to apologize again, properly this time. Sierra gestured to a chair near her workstation. Have a seat. I'm just finishing this hem, if you don't mind waiting. Roman sat, watching her skilled hands guide fabric through the machine. The shop smelled of clean cotton and lavender. Afternoon light spilled across rolls of fabric in jewel tones and pastels. It felt worlds away from his sterile corporate office. "How long have you been sewing?" he asked, trying to fill the silence. Sierra's hand stilled for a moment. "Since I was 8. After my mother died, it was the only thing that made sense. Creating something beautiful from pieces of nothing. It helped me believe in possibilities again." The simple honesty in her voice caught him off guard. "I'm sorry about your mother." Sierra nodded, continuing her work. "What about you? What made you want to run a company?" Roman laughed without humor. "Honestly, power, control, success, all the things they tell you matter." He paused, surprised by his own candor. "Lately, though, I'm not sure what any of it means." "When was the last time you talked to your workers? Really talked to them?" Roman trailed off, realizing he couldn't remember. Sierra finished the hem and turned to face him fully. "Sometimes we get so focused on numbers, we forget about people." "You sound like—" Roman stopped himself, an old memory surfacing. "Like who?" "The company's founder. He used to say similar things before he died." Sierra's hands trembled slightly as she folded the dress, but Roman didn't notice. They talked for another hour about business, community, the way things used to be. Roman found himself sharing doubts he'd never voiced aloud. Sierra listened without judgment, offering quiet insights that made him think. When Roman finally left, Sierra sat in her empty shop as sunset painted the walls golden. She touched the fabric she'd been working on, thinking about the man who'd just left. So different from the cruel executive she'd first met. There was humanity in him, buried under years of corporate armor. But that same man had denied her mother's desperate plea for help, had dismantled programs that supported hundreds of families. Across town, Roman sat in his home office, staring at a computer screen. The preliminary report from his private investigator glowed in the darkness. Sierra Dane, daughter of Maria Dane, granddaughter of William Dane. His throat went dry as names and dates aligned. The founder's secret granddaughter, the heir apparent, the seamstress he'd humiliated. With shaking hands, he dialed his phone. "Emergency board meeting. Tomorrow morning. No excuses." Fear coiled in his stomach as he stared at old photos of William Dane on his wall. Everything he'd built, every ruthless decision, every shortcut taken, it could all crumble tomorrow. In the growing darkness, Roman began to plan. The morning sun had barely touched the city skyline when Roman strode into the Hale Industries boardroom. His polished shoes clicked against marble floors as anxiety churned in his stomach. Board members in pressed suits filed in silently, their faces grim. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Roman began, his voice tight. He loosened his tie slightly, feeling trapped. "I've discovered concerning information about a potential inheritor claiming rights to the company." Murmurs rippled through the room. Roman distributed folders containing the preliminary investigation results about Sierra. "We can't risk an unknown element destabilizing everything we've built," he continued, pacing. "I propose an emergency motion to block any inheritance claims pending extensive legal verification." The board members exchanged glances, some nodding. They understood what was at stake: their power, their control, their carefully constructed system. "All those in favor?" Roman asked, his pen hovering over the document, hands raised around the table. Roman signed first, followed by each board member. The motion passed unanimously. "Let's see this mystery heir try to take control now," someone muttered. Roman smiled thinly, but guilt gnawed at his conscience. Sierra's gentle face flashed in his mind, her patience with the young girls at the charity event, her quiet wisdom in the shop. He pushed the image away. Across town, Sierra sat with Callum in her hotel suite, spreading papers across a coffee table. Sunlight streamed through tall windows as they reviewed her plans for company reform. These pension restorations would mean so much to the retired workers, Sierra said, highlighting a section. Her eyes sparkled with purpose. And reopening the community workshops could provide jobs for hundreds. Callum smiled, pride warming his weathered face. Your grandfather would be overjoyed to see this, Sierra. You truly understand his vision. They worked through the morning, Sierra's notebook filling with ideas. She wanted to announce these changes at tomorrow night's final gala, a perfect moment to reveal both her identity and her commitment to healing what was broken. Her phone buzzed with a text from Roman. Coffee this afternoon? Need to talk. Sierra's heart fluttered as she replied yes. She chose a small cafe near the hotel, its worn leather seats and exposed brick walls creating a cozy atmosphere. Roman arrived looking less polished than usual, his tie loosened and hair slightly disheveled. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. They ordered. Black coffee for him, chai latte for her. The afternoon light softened Roman's usually sharp features as they talked. He spoke about his childhood dreams before corporate life consumed him, and Sierra shared stories about learning to sew on her mother's old machine. You make me see things differently, Roman admitted, turning his coffee cup slowly. The company, my choices, everything. Sierra leaned forward. Sometimes we need fresh eyes to see what matters. Roman's face clouded. The morning's signed motion felt heavy in his briefcase. He opened his mouth to confess, to warn her, but fear closed his throat. Instead, he asked about her latest sewing projects. They talked until their drinks went cold, laughing over shared stories and discovering unexpected common ground. Sierra felt hope blooming in her chest. Maybe change was possible. Maybe Roman could be part of the healing she envisioned. That evening, Sierra answered a knock at her hotel door to find Callum holding a thick folder. Updated documents from today, he said gravely. You should see this. Sierra settled at her desk, flipping through papers until she found it. The emergency motion, Roman's bold signature at the top. Her hands trembled as she read the words designed to block her inheritance, signed mere hours before their coffee meeting. The betrayal cut deep, not because of the business implications, she already held the legal power, but because she'd begun to trust him. Their afternoon conversation replayed in her mind, now tainted with lies. Tears spilled onto the papers as Callum quietly left. Sierra moved to the window, watching city lights blur through her tears. The weight of responsibility pressed against her grief. Tomorrow's gala loomed ahead, her moment to step into her grandfather's legacy. I'll still go tomorrow, she whispered to her reflection in the dark glass. The words held both pain and determination. The city sparkled below, indifferent to her broken heart, while cars moved like distant stars through the streets. Sierra pressed her forehead against the cool window, letting tears fall freely now. Her grandfather's company, her mother's struggles, Roman's betrayal, it all swirled together in waves of hurt. But beneath the pain, her resolve strengthened. She would face tomorrow standing tall, just as her mother had taught her. The clock struck midnight as Sierra stood vigil at her window, her quiet whisper, a promise to herself and to all those counting on her. I'll still go tomorrow. Dawn crept over the mountains with heavy grey clouds, casting a somber light across Sierra's hotel room. She stood at the window, watching snowflakes drift past like tiny pieces of her shattered trust falling from the sky. The weather matched her heart, cold, grey, and aching. Her blue gown lay carefully draped across the bed, each crystal and pearl catching what little light filtered through the windows. She'd poured her soul into every stitch, and now it would serve as her armor for the battle ahead. Sierra forced herself to sit at the small table where room service had delivered breakfast. Toast, scrambled eggs, and fruit she barely tasted. Her throat felt tight, making each bite difficult to swallow. The betrayal of yesterday still burned fresh in her mind. Roman's signature on that paper, his smiles over coffee just hours later. All of it a lie. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, pushing away her half-eaten meal. A gentle knock announced Callum's arrival. He entered carrying a leather briefcase filled with the documents that would change everything. "All the paperwork is in order," he assured her, spreading folders across the table. "The board's emergency motion means nothing. You hold full legal authority as majority shareholder, effective as of midnight last night." Sierra nodded, touching the papers with trembling fingers. "I just wish—" She trailed off, unable to voice the hurt of Roman's deception. "I know," Callum said softly, patting her hand. "But your grandfather chose you for a reason. You have his heart for people, and his courage." Across town, Roman tossed in his bed, having barely slept. Guilt gnawed at his conscience, mixing with an unsettling suspicion about Sierra's true identity. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, teaching those little girls to sew, laughing with him in the cafe, her quiet dignity in the face of his past cruelty. He dragged himself through his morning routine, adjusting his tie with less than his usual precision. Dark circles shadowed his eyes in the mirror, and his usual confident smirk felt forced. The drive to the venue passed in a blur of anxiety. Roman arrived early, stepping into the grand ballroom, where staff rushed to complete final preparations. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, tables draped in white linens stretched across the floor, and elegant flower arrangements filled the air with their sweet scent. Board members huddled in small groups, their whispered conversations stopping whenever he passed. They could sense something coming, something beyond their control. Their nervous energy filled the room like static before a storm. "Everything's secure, right?" one member asked Roman, adjusting his collar anxiously. "Of course," Roman answered, but uncertainty churned in his stomach. Meanwhile, Sierra stood before her hotel mirror, smoothing her hands over the deep blue silk of her gown. The bodice fit perfectly, scattered with delicate beading that caught the light like stars. Her mother's silver necklace rested at her throat, a reminder of where she came from and who she was fighting for. Callum waited in the lobby as Sierra descended in the elevator, legal folders clutched to her chest like a shield. The car ride to the venue passed in tense silence, each turn bringing her closer to the moment of truth. The venue's circular drive was already busy with arriving guests when Sierra's car pulled up. She took a deep breath, squeezing Callum's hand before the driver opened her door. Sierra stepped out with grace that belied her inner turmoil. Her heels clicked against the polished marble as she entered the lobby, head held high despite the weight in her heart. The noise of arriving guests faded to a distant hum as she focused on keeping her composure. Roman stood near the ballroom's grand entrance, greeting board members, when he caught sight of her. The world seemed to slow as he watched her approach. She moved with an authority he'd never noticed before, commanding attention without saying a word. This wasn't the seamstress he'd once mocked. This was someone who carried power in her very bearing. His breath caught as realization dawned. The inheritance rumors, her recent legal meetings, her connection to the Dane family, it all clicked into place. Fear and awe mingled in his chest as he watched her draw closer to the ballroom doors. Sierra paused at the threshold, her fingers tightening on her folders. Through the open doors, she could see the glittering room, where everything would change. The cruelty Roman had brought to her grandfather's company would end here, in the very place it had begun. The morning's grey light filtered through tall windows, catching the crystals in her gown and the determination in her eyes as she took her first step forward. The time for hiding was over. The ballroom's elegant silence shattered into a wave of whispers as Sierra stepped through the doorway. Her deep blue gown caught the morning light streaming through the tall windows, making the delicate beadwork shimmer like stars against a twilight sky. Her natural curls were swept up elegantly, highlighting the quiet dignity in her expression. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a path toward the stage. Cameras clicked rapidly, their flashes reflecting off the crystal chandeliers overhead. At the front of the room, Roman stood frozen, his usual mask of control slipping as he watched her approach. His fingers tightened around his champagne glass, knuckles turning white. Sierra walked with measured steps, each click of her heels against the polished floor echoing in the hushed space. She felt hundreds of eyes following her movement, but kept her gaze steady, focused on the podium ahead. This was the moment her grandfather had prepared for, though she'd never known him. Callum met her at the steps to the stage, offering his arm, with grandfatherly protectiveness. The microphone stood ready, gleaming under the spotlights. Sierra took her place behind it, setting her folders down with careful precision. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady as she nodded to Callum. "Ladies and gentlemen," Callum began, his distinguished voice carrying across the now silent room. "As legal executor of the Hale family estate, it is my honor to introduce Sierra Dane, granddaughter of our company's beloved founder, and as of midnight last night, the majority shareholder of Hale Industries." The silence exploded into chaos. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing frantically. Board members grabbed their phones, faces contorted with shock. In the front row, Roman seemed to age years in seconds, the color draining from his face as understanding dawned. Sierra leaned toward the microphone, her quiet voice somehow cutting through the commotion. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves." She opened the first folder, though she knew the words by heart. 50 years ago, my grandfather built this company on principles of innovation and compassion. He believed that true success meant lifting others up, not stepping on them to climb higher. She met Roman's eyes directly for the first time. He flinched at the gentle strength in her gaze, so different from the cruelty he'd shown her that day at the resort. "Some of you may remember me as the seamstress whose work was publicly mocked in this very building. Others know me as the stranger who sat with your children, teaching them to sew. Today I stand before you as both of those people, and as the woman legally entrusted with restoring this company's soul." The legal documents appeared on the massive screens behind her, projected for all to see. "The transfer of ownership is complete and binding," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Every signature has been verified, every requirement met. But I'm not here to simply claim power. I'm here to remake it into something worthy of my grandfather's vision." Reporters scribbled furiously as Sierra outlined the changes to come. Restored pension programs, reopened community workshops, renewed support for working families. With each announcement, applause grew louder, drowning out the board members' worried mutters. "This is the dawn of a new era at Hale Industries," Sierra declared, her voice rich with conviction. "An era where profit and compassion work hand in hand, where success is measured not just in dollars, but in dignity, where every worker knows their value extends beyond their productivity." The applause rose like a tidal wave, sweeping through the room. Sierra's hands shook as she gathered her papers, but her steps were steady as she descended from the stage. The crowd surged around her, reporters calling questions, workers reaching out to shake her hand, community leaders offering tearful thanks. Through the press of bodies, Sierra caught a glimpse of Roman. He stood absolutely still, watching as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. The arrogance had drained from his posture, replaced by the stunned realization of everything he'd lost. Not through revenge or malice, but through the simple power of truth finally spoken. As cameras continued flashing and questions flew through the air, Sierra maintained her composure. She answered each inquiry with gentle authority, her voice never rising, her dignity never wavering. She had become in this moment everything her grandfather had seen in her, a leader who could heal what greed had broken. The morning light streamed stronger through the windows now, casting Sierra's silhouette in gold as she moved through the crowd. The deep blue of her gown seemed to glow, no longer a shield against mockery, but a symbol of the grace with which she'd claimed her birthright. In every handshake, every quiet word of thanks, every tearful smile from long-time workers, she felt her grandfather's legacy coming alive again through her hands. Roman watched helplessly as person after person gravitated toward Sierra, drawn by the authentic warmth he'd never managed to fake. His carefully cultivated image of corporate brilliance seemed hollow now, exposed by the simple power of her genuine concern for others. In her quiet strength, he finally saw the magnitude of his mistake, not just in underestimating her, but in forgetting the human heart of business itself. The whispers that had greeted Sierra's entrance had transformed into a steady hum of excitement and hope. Where there had been tension, there was now possibility. Where there had been fear, there was now faith. Sierra stood in the center of it all, perfectly poised, responding to each person with the same careful attention she gave to every stitch in her sewing. Through it all, she never once looked back at Roman. She didn't need to. The truth had spoken for itself, more powerful than any revenge could have been. His humiliation came not from her words or actions, but from the stark contrast between what he had chosen to become and what she had remained. Someone who saw the worth in every person, who understood that true power lay in lifting others up, not tearing them down. The morning continued to unfold in a whirl of handshakes, photographs, and heartfelt conversations. Sierra's transformation from hidden heir to visible leader happened not with dramatic flair, but with the same quiet grace that had always defined her. Even as her hands trembled with the weight of her new responsibility, her resolve remained unshaken, strengthened by each story shared, each tear of gratitude shed, each hope renewed. As the initial shock of Sierra's announcement settled, the ballroom transformed into a scene of joyful reconnection. Longtime employees, many with tears in their eyes, formed a line to meet their new leader. Sierra took time with each person, her gentle presence drawing out stories that needed to be told. "My father worked here for 35 years under your grandfather," shared Martha, an elderly woman whose hands trembled as she clasped Sierra's. "He always said Mr. Dane treated everyone like family." Sierra squeezed the woman's hands warmly. "Tell me more about your father," she encouraged, ignoring the impatient reporters hovering nearby. Across the room, Roman kept trying to make his way toward Sierra, but each attempt was blocked. Camera crews swarmed around her, their lights creating a barrier he couldn't breach. Board members pulled at his sleeve with urgent questions he couldn't answer. His normally commanding presence seemed to have deserted him, leaving him looking lost in the sea of celebration. Eleanor Thompson, a retired factory supervisor, approached Sierra with dignity despite her weathered face. "Your grandfather started a scholarship program for our children?" she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "It meant everything to us." When it was cut, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Sierra knew who had made that decision. The scholarship program will be reinstated, Sierra assured her, along with other community initiatives. We're going to rebuild what was lost. Hours passed as Sierra continued meeting people, learning names and stories, absorbing the human cost of Roman's policies. Her feet ached in her heels, but she wouldn't rush these moments. Each conversation strengthened her resolve to heal the company's wounds. Finally, during a brief lull in the festivities, Sierra stepped into a quiet hallway to catch her breath. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. Roman stood there, his usual polish replaced by genuine vulnerability. "Sierra," he began, his voice hoarse. "I don't know where to start." She waited silently, giving him space to find his words. "I've spent years convincing myself that ruthlessness was strength," he continued, running a hand through his usually perfect hair. "Every decision I made, I told myself it was necessary. That sentiment was weakness. That control was everything." Sierra watched his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Why?" she asked simply. "Fear," he admitted, the word seeming to cost him. "I was terrified of losing everything I'd built, of being seen as weak, of failing." He let out a shaky breath. "I turned cruelty into armor, and I hurt so many people, including you. Including me," Sierra agreed quietly. "And an entire community. I know saying sorry isn't enough." Roman's voice cracked slightly. "But I am truly, deeply sorry. For the mockery at the resort, for blocking the inheritance, for every decision that put profit above people." Sierra studied him for a long moment. The arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by someone who looked both smaller and more human. "I forgive you," she said finally. "As a person, I forgive you. But as a leader," she shook her head. "Trust has to be earned back. Through actions, not words." Roman nodded, accepting her terms with unexpected grace. "I understand. I'll step down if that's what you want." "That's not my decision yet," Sierra replied. "But things will change, significantly." "They should," he agreed quietly. They stood in silence for a moment before Roman spoke again. "Your grandfather would be proud of you." Sierra felt tears threatening, but held them back. "Thank you," she said simply. They parted ways without another word, both understanding that while healing was possible, it wouldn't be quick or easy. Returning to the ballroom, Sierra found herself surrounded by reporters again. Their questions came rapid fire. "What changes will you implement first? How will you address the pension crisis? What role will Mr. Hale play moving forward?" Sierra answered each question thoughtfully, her responses focused on healing and restoration rather than blame or revenge. By the time the last reporter packed away their camera, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. The gala slowly wound down, guests filtering out into the night until only cleaning crews remained. Sierra's driver took her back to her hotel, the city lights blurring past her window. In her room, she slipped off her shoes and stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the glittering skyline. The weight of the day, of all the days leading up to it, settled around her shoulders. She felt profoundly alone, despite the hundreds of people she'd spoken to. This was her grandfather's legacy, but he wasn't here to guide her. Her mother wasn't here to see her triumph. The path ahead would require every ounce of strength and wisdom she possessed. Yet as she watched the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars, hope bloomed alongside the loneliness. She'd seen real joy in people's eyes tonight, genuine belief that things could be better. She'd witnessed Roman's capacity for change, proving that transformation was possible even in the hardest hearts. Sierra pressed her palm against the cool glass, her reflection overlaying the city beyond. She was no longer the invisible seamstress, but she would keep that part of herself. The patience, the attention to detail, the ability to mend what was broken. Those skills would serve her well in the task ahead. The morning sun cast long shadows through the executive floor windows as Sierra approached the CEO's office. Her sensible heels clicked against the polished marble, each step echoing with purpose. The security guard, an older gentleman named Pete, smiled warmly as he unlocked the heavy wooden door. "Welcome home, Ms. Dane," he said softly. Sierra paused in the doorway, taking in the vast office with its commanding view of the mountains. Dark wood paneling and leather furniture spoke of old money and power. Her grandfather had worked here once, dreaming up ways to help people. Then Roman had occupied this space, dismantling those dreams piece by piece. Now it was her turn. She set her leather bag down and settled behind the massive desk, running her fingers across its smooth surface. A stack of personnel files waited in the center, placed there by her assistant. Sierra took a deep breath and opened the first one. The numbers were worse than she'd imagined. Hundreds of layoffs planned for the coming quarter, pension cuts that would leave elderly workers struggling to survive, workshop closures that would devastate entire communities. Sierra reached for the phone. "Janet, could you call an emergency meeting with HR and finance and get me the contact information for all department heads?" Within an hour, she had implemented an immediate freeze on all planned layoffs. By mid-morning, she'd drafted initial proposals to reinstate the community programs Roman had shut down: the apprenticeship initiative, the emergency family fund, the senior care supplement. A soft knock interrupted her work around 11 o'clock. Martha Davies, a grey-haired accounting manager who'd worked for the company for 35 years, stood in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "Is it true?" Martha whispered. "About the pension supplements coming back?" Sierra stood and walked around her desk. "Yes, it's true. We're restoring them immediately, with back pay for the last 6 months." Martha's hands trembled as she covered her mouth. "My Henry, he's been so worried. The medical bills, and with the cuts." She broke off, overcome. Sierra gently guided the older woman to sit. "Those days are over," she promised. "We're going to take care of our people again." Word spread quickly. Throughout the morning, Sierra met with long-time employees who shared stories of hardship under Roman's leadership and hope for the future. Each conversation strengthened her conviction that she was doing the right thing. Around 2 o'clock, Roman himself appeared in her doorway. He looked different, humbler somehow, his usual sharp suit replaced by more casual business attire. In his hands, he held a thick folder. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Sierra gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Of course." Roman sat, placing the folder between them. "I spent all night working on this," he said. "Revised proposals for worker benefits, including some ideas I should have implemented years ago." Sierra opened the folder, scanning the detailed plans. Healthcare expansions, educational assistance, flexible scheduling for working parents. The proposals were thorough and worker-focused. "This is impressive," she admitted, looking up at him. "I've been wrong for a long time." Roman said simply, "I lost sight of what matters, but I'd like to help fix what I broke, if you'll let me." They spent the next 2 hours going through the proposals together. Roman's business acumen was undeniable, and his suggestions for implementation were practical and immediate. Sierra found herself appreciating his expertise even as she remained cautious about his motives. "We could start with the healthcare changes next month," he suggested. "The infrastructure is already there, it just needs to be expanded." Sierra nodded. "And the educational assistance could roll out by next quarter. But the family support programs are my priority. Those need to happen now." "Agreed," Roman said, making notes. "I can have the paperwork ready by morning." As they worked, Sierra noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. Gone was the cutting arrogance, replaced by genuine attention to detail and concern for impact. He asked thoughtful questions about community needs and listened carefully to her answers. When the workday finally ended, Sierra's head was swimming with figures and policies. She gathered her things, bone-tired but satisfied with the progress made. The office had slowly emptied, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the fading mountain light. Her hotel room felt peaceful after the intensity of the day. She ordered a simple dinner, soup and bread, and changed into comfortable clothes. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, she bowed her head in prayer. "Lord, give me wisdom," she whispered. "Show me how to lead with grace and strength. Help me honor my grandfather's legacy while creating something new." The weight of leadership felt overwhelming. So many people depending on her decisions, so many wrongs to right, so many hopes to fulfill. Her laptop chimed with a new email. Opening it, Sierra felt tears well up as she read. "Dear Ms. Dane, we are the workers from Factory Unit 3. Today we heard about the pension supplements being restored. Many of us had given up hope of ever seeing that money again. Some were planning to sell their homes. Others couldn't afford their medications. Your grandfather used to visit us on the factory floor. He knew our names, our families. When he died and things changed under Mr. Hale, we lost more than money. We lost our dignity. Today, you gave us back our hope. Thank you for remembering us. Thank you for caring. With deepest gratitude, the workers of Unit 3. Sierra wiped her eyes, touching the screen gently. This was why she was here. Not for power or revenge, but for moments like this. For the chance to make life better for people who had been forgotten. The city lights twinkled beyond her window as she sat in the growing darkness, holding on to that sense of purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she could rest knowing she had taken the first steps toward healing her grandfather's company. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the factory parking lot as Sierra stepped out of her car. Her practical flats clicked against the concrete as she walked toward the entrance of the first facility on today's schedule. Roman was already waiting there, looking different in casual khakis and a button-down shirt instead of his usual tailored suits. "Good morning," he said quietly, holding a clipboard. "I printed the maintenance reports you requested." Sierra nodded, noticing the dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd been up late reviewing documents. "Thank you. Shall we start with the main floor?" The heavy metal doors creaked open to reveal a vast space filled with outdated machinery. The air was thick with dust and the mechanical whir of ancient equipment. Workers glanced up as Sierra and Roman walked through, their expressions a mixture of hope and wariness. Sierra stopped at each station, introducing herself warmly and asking detailed questions about working conditions. Roman hung back slightly, watching as she connected effortlessly with people he'd never bothered to meet. "This threading machine," an older woman named Martha explained, "it jams at least twice a day. We lose hours of production time." Sierra ran her hand along the worn metal. "How long has it been since maintenance checked it?" "Can't remember the last time." Martha admitted. "Maybe 3 years?" Roman's face tightened with shame. He'd signed off on cutting maintenance budgets without ever considering the human cost. Throughout the morning, similar stories emerged. Broken heating units left unrepaired. Safety equipment that needed replacing. Benefits stripped away year after year. Sierra took careful notes, but more importantly, she listened, really listened, to every person who spoke. By lunchtime, they'd toured 2 facilities. Sierra suggested they eat in the workers' cafeteria rather than leaving for a restaurant. Roman hesitated, but followed her lead. "The food's not what you're used to," she said gently, "but breaking bread together matters." They sat with a group of line workers who initially fell silent at Roman's presence. But Sierra's easy manner helped bridge the awkward gap. Soon, stories and even careful laughter flowed around the table. "My father worked here for 40 years. One man shared. "Used to say this place was like family. Your grandfather made sure of that, Ms. Dane." Sierra smiled warmly. "Tell me more about those days." As the man spoke about company picnics and Christmas bonuses and medical assistance when his sister got sick, Roman grew increasingly quiet. His untouched sandwich sat before him as the weight of all he'd dismantled became clear. The afternoon brought visits to a third facility. This one was in the worst shape. Water damage on the ceiling, inadequate ventilation, workers crowded into tight spaces with malfunctioning equipment. "I can't believe I let this happen," Roman muttered, standing in a corner while Sierra spoke with a group of seamstresses. She heard him, but kept her focus on the women, asking about their needs, their challenges, their hopes for change. Only after finishing the conversation did she turn to him. "Regret can be productive," she said softly, "if we use it as fuel for change rather than letting it paralyze us." Her words seemed to steady him. For the rest of the afternoon, Roman engaged more actively, asking questions about working conditions and taking detailed notes about needed repairs. As evening approached, they finished the last inspection. The parking lot had emptied except for their 2 cars. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains. "Would you like to talk for a moment?" Sierra asked, sensing Roman's need to process the day. They sat on a low concrete wall near the building's entrance. For a while, neither spoke, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft oranges and pinks. "I never came here," Roman finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not once in 5 years as CEO. I looked at spreadsheets and profit margins, but I never saw the actual people affected by my decisions." Sierra listened without judgment, letting him continue. "Your grandfather built something beautiful here, not just a business, but a community. And I destroyed it because I was too proud, too afraid of appearing weak, too focused on impressing the board with cost-cutting measures." "The past is the past," Sierra said gently. "What matters is what we do now." Roman turned to look at her, his eyes vulnerable in the fading light. "Do you really believe in second chances?" "I have to," she replied. "Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? Redemption isn't about erasing mistakes. It's about learning from them and choosing a better path forward." Their eyes met, and something soft and unexpected passed between them, a moment of pure understanding that transcended their complicated history. Sierra was the first to look away, maintaining the professional boundary they both knew was necessary. But her voice remained kind as she stood up. "Tomorrow we'll start implementing changes," she said. "There's so much work to do, but we'll do it right this time." Roman nodded, getting to his feet. "Thank you," he said simply, "for showing me what I couldn't or wouldn't see before." They walked to their cars in comfortable silence. As Sierra drove back to her hotel, she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The day had been exhausting but purposeful. She saw genuine change beginning in Roman, not through harsh judgment but through gentle guidance and unwavering principle. The hotel lobby glowed warmly as she entered, her mind already turning to tomorrow's tasks. But for now, she carried with her the image of sunrise breaking over the mountains, of hope dawning in weary workers' eyes, of transformation beginning in the most unexpected places. The community center buzzed with anticipation as hundreds of people filed into the large auditorium. Sierra stood backstage, smoothing her simple navy dress and reviewing her notes one last time. The worn leather folder in her hands contained not just plans, but promises she intended to keep. 5 minutes until we begin, Ms. Dane," an assistant whispered. Through a gap in the curtains, Sierra could see familiar faces filling the rows. Factory workers still in their work clothes, having rushed over after their shifts. Retired employees leaning on canes or sitting in wheelchairs, brought by their children. Young mothers bouncing babies on their knees. The girls from her sewing charity waved excitedly when they spotted her peeking out. Roman arrived quietly, taking a position near the side of the stage. He wore a simpler suit than usual. Charcoal grey instead of his signature black, his tie loosened slightly. The past few days had softened something in him, worn away some of the sharp edges. At exactly 7 o'clock, Sierra stepped onto the stage. The crowd fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. The weight of their hope and hurt pressed against her heart. "Good evening," she began, her voice warm and steady. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I see so many familiar faces, people who have given decades of their lives to this company, people who believed in my grandfather's vision of what a business could be." She paused, making eye contact with an elderly seamstress in the front row who had worked alongside her grandfather. "4 days ago, I became CEO of Hale Industries, but tonight isn't about titles or corporate announcements. Tonight is about restoration, about making things right." Sierra opened her leather folder and began outlining the changes. Her voice grew stronger with each point, filled with quiet conviction. Effective immediately, all pension cuts from the past 5 years will be reversed. Those who lost benefits will have them reinstated with back pay. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several older workers reached for tissues. "The community sewing workshops will reopen in all 12 locations that were closed. They'll be upgraded with new equipment and expanded programs for youth mentorship." The young girls from her charity bounced in their seats, clutching each other's hands. "We're establishing partnerships with 3 major healthcare networks to provide comprehensive medical coverage for all employees and their families. This includes mental health services, dental, and vision care." A young mother in the third row burst into tears, hugging her toddler close. Sierra knew she had been struggling to afford her son's glasses. And perhaps most importantly, Sierra continued, "We're implementing new ethical manufacturing standards. No more overseas sweatshops, no more cutting corners on worker safety. Every facility will be upgraded to exceed safety requirements. Every employee will receive fair wages and reasonable hours." The room erupted in applause. Sierra raised her hand gently. Not finished yet. "These changes aren't just about money or policies. They're about recognizing the dignity of every person who makes this company what it is. My grandfather understood that a business is only as strong as its people. Today, we return to that wisdom." She went on to detail implementation timelines, introducing the team leaders who would oversee each initiative. Questions came from the audience, thoughtful, hopeful questions about specific needs and concerns. Sierra answered each one with care and clarity, never rushing, making sure everyone felt heard. From his position off stage, Roman watched in awe. He saw how naturally leadership sat on her shoulders, how her strength came not from intimidation, but from genuine care. When she spoke about ethical manufacturing, he remembered their factory tours, how she had known workers' names, asked about their families, noticed small details he had overlooked for years. The formal presentation lasted 2 hours, but Sierra stayed afterward, moving through the crowd, listening to stories, offering hugs to those who needed them. The room hummed with joy and relief. Groups of workers clustered together, wiping happy tears and making plans for the future. As the crowd finally began to thin, Sierra stepped outside into the warm evening air. The sun had set, but strings of lights twinkled along the community center's walkway, casting a gentle glow. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the breeze cool her flushed cheeks. "Sierra." She turned to find Roman standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, uncertainty written across his face. "The way you handled that room," he said softly. "The way you connected with every person. I've never seen anything like it." Sierra smiled gently. "They're people, Roman, not numbers on a spreadsheet. That's all it takes. Seeing them as people." He took a step closer, his expression vulnerable in the dim light. "Do you really believe someone like me can change, after everything I've done?" Sierra considered his question carefully, remembering how he had listened during their factory tours, how he had begun asking different questions, showing genuine concern for the workers. "Change isn't about erasing who we were," she answered finally. "It's about choosing who we want to become. Anyone can change if they're willing to choose humility over pride, compassion over control." Roman nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers with new resolve. "I want to be better," he said quietly. "Not to get power back, not to prove anything to the board, but because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because watching you lead with such integrity makes me want to be the kind of person who deserves to be part of what you're building." The honesty in his voice touched something in Sierra's heart. She saw the man beneath the corporate armor, someone who had lost his way but was finding it again, step by careful step. "Then start with tomorrow," she said kindly. "Each day is a new chance to choose differently." A few remaining workers passed by, calling out thanks and good nights. Sierra waved, her smile genuine despite her exhaustion. The evening had drained her, but in the best way possible, the way that comes from doing necessary, meaningful work. "I should head back to the hotel," she said. "We have an early meeting with the pension administrators." Roman stepped back, respecting the professional boundary she maintained. "Of course. Thank you, Sierra, for everything." She gathered her folders and walked to her car, the warm breeze carrying the scent of summer flowers. Hope filled her chest, hope for the company's future, for the workers' well-being, and yes, even for Roman's transformation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight had proved that change was possible, that healing could begin, that light could break through even the darkest corporate walls. A soft breeze drifted through the factory's open windows as Sierra made her way across the main floor, her deep blue gown swaying gracefully with each step. The morning sun streamed through the high windows, catching the fabric's subtle shimmer. The same gown she had worn to claim her inheritance now symbolized hope restored. Workers paused at their stations, breaking into spontaneous applause as she passed. Their faces shone with gratitude and renewed pride. Many wiped tears from their eyes, remembering how close they had come to losing everything before Sierra stepped in. "Welcome back, everyone," Sierra called warmly, stopping to embrace Mrs. Henderson, who had worked the same station for 30 years. "It's so good to see you all where you belong." From near the supervisor's office, Roman watched the scene unfold. His chest swelled not with the jealousy that once would have consumed him, but with genuine pride. Sierra moved through the space with natural grace and authority. She truly belonged here, carrying forward her grandfather's legacy of compassion. Sierra paused at a workstation, her fingers trailing over a bolt of fabric. The texture beneath her fingertips connected her to generations of craftsmanship, to the very foundation her family had built. The machinery hummed steadily around her, a rhythm of renewal and hope. Roman approached quietly, maintaining a respectful distance. "Sierra," he said softly, "seeing you here, leading with such grace, I wonder if someday you might consider letting me stand beside you again, not as someone seeking control, but as a partner in rebuilding what I nearly destroyed." His voice grew quieter. "Perhaps even, in time, as someone in your life." Sierra turned to face him, her expression gentle but measured. "Trust is like these machines, Roman. It needs maintenance, care, and time to run smoothly again. But yes, with honesty and patience, it can grow back stronger. Together, they walked the factory floor, close but not touching, their steps falling into natural rhythm. The industrial hums and whirs around them felt like music, the sound of healing, of second chances, of life returning to a place that had nearly lost its soul. As they reached the main doors, Sierra stepped out into the morning sunlight. She looked back at the factory, at the workers moving with renewed purpose, at Roman standing thoughtfully beside her. In reclaiming her inheritance, she had done more than take back a company. She had restored the heartbeat of a community and helped a hardened man remember his humanity. The morning sun filtered through the hotel curtains as Sierra stretched and rose from her bed. Yesterday's joy still warmed her heart, though she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a familiar shawl. After a quiet breakfast of toast and coffee, she made her way to headquarters where Callum waited in the executive conference room. "Good morning," he greeted warmly, spreading documents across the polished table. "These are the final protections for the pension plans and community programs. Once signed, they'll be permanently secured." Throughout the morning, a steady stream of elderly employees stopped by, bearing small gifts, home-baked cookies, handwritten cards, even a carefully preserved photo of her grandfather. Each offering brought tears to Sierra's eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud," whispered Mrs. Chen, pressing a tin of jasmine tea into Sierra's hands. In the afternoon sunshine, Sierra and Roman walked the rooftop terrace. The city sprawled below them as Sierra shared her vision for a new mentorship program. "I want to teach more than just sewing," she explained, her voice passionate. "These girls need financial skills, leadership training, everything my mother struggled without." Roman listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about implementation and resources. His genuine interest, free from any hint of control, confirmed the depth of his change. As evening approached, Sierra drove back to her mountain town shop. When she unlocked the door, she gasped. The space was filled with familiar faces, Mags beaming proudly, retired tailors clutching small gifts, young girls from her charity classes bouncing with excitement, and neighbors whose prayers had carried her through. "Surprise!" they called out together. Homemade banners celebrated her courage, while covered dishes filled her cutting table. "You've given us all new life," Mags said, hugging her tight. "We wanted to show our gratitude." After the impromptu party wound down and the last guest departed, Sierra sat at her beloved sewing table. Under the warm lamplight, she began sketching a new gown, not for power or proof, but for joy. Through her window, the moonlit mountains stood guard as she worked, their eternal presence reminding her of the certainty she now felt in her heart. She had found her place, reclaimed her heritage, and opened herself to whatever gentle future might unfold. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.